To understand what someone is hiding, notice this detail that no one notices. Nikola Tesla was alone in the laboratory when he realized that his assistant had lied. It wasn't the words. Those were perfectly rehearsed. It was because of the silence between them, that artificial void, too heavy to be natural. Thomas Edison always said that Tesla lived in the clouds, disconnected from the real world. But on that night in 1895, while watching Marcus, his trusted assistant for 3 years, Tesla understood something that would change everything. People hide secrets not in what they say, but in the rhythm with which they breathe before they speak. Marcus was standing at the counter, holding a manila envelope. His hands were shaking slightly, not from ordinary nervousness, but from that microscopic tremor that appears when someone is about to betray. Tesla didn't need machines to detect human frequencies. He had spent years studying waves, magnetic fields, invisible vibrations, and now I realized each lie has its own frequency. Mr. Tesla, Marcus began, and there was that pause, half a second longer than it should have been. I got an offer for a job in Pittsburgh. Tesla continued adjusting the copper wires in his coil without looking up. He knew, not because Marcus was lying about Pittsburgh, that was true, but because he was hiding who had made the proposal, and Tesla already knew the answer. I felt the distorted energy field around the assistant, as if he was carrying someone else's intentions stuck to his skin. Edison offered you how much? Tesla asked calmly, still not looking up. The silence that followed was more revealing than any confession. Marcus swallowed hard. Tesla clearly heard the sound of saliva going down his throat and tried to laugh, but the sound came out broken, out of tune. I don't know what you're talking about. Tesla finally faced him. His piercing blue eyes seemed to see through layers of human tissue, through muscle and bone until they reached something deeper, intent. 3 seconds ago, you blinked 4 times in a row, Tesla said with the same neutrality as someone describing an experiment. Your heart rate has accelerated. I can see the pulse on the side of your neck. You looked exactly 15 degrees to the left before responding. The classic pattern of those accessing fabricated, not real memories. Marcus took a step back. The envelope fell to the floor. But the most fascinating thing, Tesla continued, slowly standing up, is that you brought this here. He pointed to the envelope. No one brings in a letter of resignation at 10 o'clock at night, Marcus, unless they need to witness something before they leave, unless they've been instructed to observe, copy, report. The color drained from Marcus's face as if someone had opened a valve. Tesla walked to the window, looking out at New York City lit by its own AC light bulbs, the technology Edison swore to destroy. Below, the streets glowed with the proof of their victory. But inside, in the silence of the laboratory, a different war was being fought. Do you know the difference between me and Edison? Tesla asked, his back to Marcus. He believes that power is in dominating people. I discovered that power is in understanding them. And you, Marcus, you are as clear as glass to anyone who knows where to look. Marcus finally broke down. He sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, holding his head in his hands. He said you were crazy, Marcus murmured. He said your projects would never work, that you would die poor and forgotten. He offered me triple my salary just to observe, write down, take the schematics. Tesla slowly turned around. There was no anger in his face, just that scientific curiosity that made him both human and alien. And what did you observe, Marcus? That you were right about everything. A sad smile crossed Tesla's face. He knew that this battle with Edison would not end there. I knew there would be other Marcus, other betrayals, other silences filled with lies. But now he possessed something that Edison would never have, the ability to read the invisible. Go ahead, Tesla said calmly. Take the envelope. Tell Edison you saw what you came to see, but don't tell him what you really discovered here. Marcus stood up, confused. What did I discover? Tesla returned to his coil, resuming work as if nothing had happened. That some frequencies can't be stolen, Marcus. Only understood. When the door closed, Tesla took a deep breath. Outside, Marcus would take false reports to Edison. But here, alone with his machines and his infinite mind, Tesla had just unlocked something much greater than electricity, the secret code of human consciousness. And this discovery would change not only his life, but the way we see each other forever. If this story is resonating, go inside you. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. What comes next goes beyond what Tesla has publicly revealed. 3 weeks have passed since the night Marcus left. Tesla didn't miss him. He missed the illusion of trust. Now, each new assistant who knocked on his door brought with him a silent question. Who sent you? But it was precisely this distrust that led him to dive even deeper. If people hid intentions through micro-expressions, pauses, and biological frequencies, then there must be a map, an invisible grammar of lies. And Tesla, obsessed as always, decided to decipher it. He began going to places he previously avoided: bars, game rooms, social gatherings. Not to socialize, Tesla hated crowds, but to study. He sat in strategic corners, notebook in hand, recording patterns. The way a man scratched his nose before bluffing in poker. The way a woman adjusted her necklace while lying about where she had been the night before. Each gesture was a silent confession. It was during one of these observations, in a Manhattan tea room, that Tesla met Eleanor. She was sitting alone, in front of an untouched cup, her eyes fixed on the window. But he wasn't looking at anything. He was running away from something. Tesla noticed it immediately: the irregular breathing, the fingers drumming an anxious rhythm on the table, the posture slightly tilted towards the nearest exit. She was scared. Against all his instincts to isolate, Tesla approached. "Sorry to intrude," he said, keeping a respectful distance, "but I noticed you haven't drunk your tea. It's been cold for at least 15 minutes. Eleanor started, as if waking from a nightmare. When his eyes met Tesla's, he saw something devastating: recognition. Not who he was, but what he represented. Someone who saw beyond the masks. "You do notice things, don't you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Tesla pulled up a chair, intrigued. "I observe frequencies, patterns, invisible vibrations that people leave in the air around them." Eleanor closed her eyes, and a lone tear slid down her cheek. "Then you can help me, because I'm married to a man who's trying to convince me I'm crazy." What she revealed over the next 2 hours completely changed Tesla's perception of his own gift. Eleanor's husband, Dr. Richard Hastings, was a respected doctor. In recent weeks, he had begun to alter small details of her reality. He moved objects around and denied having done so, told different versions of the same story, insisted that she had said things she had never said. He was systematically destroying her trust in his own mind. "My friends think I'm exaggerating," Eleanor continued, wiping away tears. "My family says I'm stressed, but I know I'm not imagining it. But how can I prove it? How can I show something so subtle, so calculated?" Tesla felt a cold anger rise up his spine, not the explosive anger of Edison, but something more dangerous: scientific outrage. Here was a man using the same knowledge that Tesla had discovered, but inverted, not to understand, but to manipulate. "He knows the patterns," Tesla muttered, mostly to himself. "Knows exactly where to press to make you doubt your own perception." Can you help me?" Eleanor asked, grabbing his hand urgently. "Can you prove that I'm not crazy?" Tesla looked at that woman on the verge of collapse and made a decision that terrified him. He would need to enter Richard Hastings' world. He would need to become invisible, observe, map each manipulation. But to capture a predator, I first needed to understand its frequency. "I'll need 3 days, Tesla said, "and your absolute trust. Don't tell anyone, especially him, that we talked." Eleanor nodded, desperate for any hope. That night, Tesla returned to the laboratory with a strange feeling in his chest. For the first time in years, I wasn't working on machines or theories. He was about to apply his discoveries about human frequencies in a real battle. And the opponent wasn't Edison. It was something much darker. As he prepared his plan, one question haunted him. If he could read people's lies, how many others could? And how many were using this gift not to enlighten, but to destroy? Tesla turned on all the lights in the laboratory, driving away the shadows. "But I knew that some darknesses don't depend on the absence of light. They inhabit the spaces between words, the calculated silences, the poisoned pauses." Richard Hastings was about to discover he had chosen the wrong victim, because now there was someone who saw his every move, and that someone knew exactly how to use the truth as a weapon. Tesla spent the 2 days followed by doing something he had never imagined: becoming a ghost. He followed Eleanor discreetly, mapping her routine, identifying the moments when Richard appeared, and, most importantly, how he appeared. Each couple's encounter was a macabre piece of theater where only one of the actors knew the script. On the first night, Tesla watched them through the window of the Hastings house, hidden among the trees in the garden. The Victorian-style mansion was lit by crystal chandeliers, a bitter irony, since the light here only made the shadows deeper. Richard arrived late, as always. Eleanor welcomed him into the living room, nervous. "Where have you been?" she asked, her voice shaking. Richard smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach his eyes. "In the hospital, honey, just like I told you this morning. Don't you remember?" Eleanor hesitated. Tesla saw the exact moment when doubt crept into her, like poison entering her bloodstream. You said you'd be back at 6. "No, love, I said 9. You even mentioned that you would have dinner alone." Richard moved closer, gently touching her face. "You're forgetting things again." Tesla clenched his fists, not because Richard was lying, but because he was doing it with surgical precision. The pause before, again, the gentle touch that simulated concern. The voices low, almost hypnotic. Each element was calculated to destabilize. But then Tesla noticed something Richard didn't, his own signs of betrayal. When he lied, Richard would unconsciously reach into his vest pocket, not to reach for anything, just an anchoring gesture, as if he needed to touch something solid while he fabricated the lie. And he always did that. Tesla smiled in the darkness. He had his first clue. On the second night, Tesla took a bolder step. Using contacts in the scientific world, he managed to be invited to a dinner at Dr. Hastings' house, a social event for doctors and medical patrons. Eleanor was surprised to see him, but maintained her composure. Richard, on the other hand, was immediately intrigued. "The famous Nikola Tesla," Richard said, extending his hand with exaggerated enthusiasm. "It's an honor. I've always admired men who see beyond the obvious." Tesla shook his hand, feeling the moist texture of his palm, nervousness disguised as cordiality. "Medicine and physics have a lot in common, Dr. Hastings. They both deal with invisible systems that govern the visible." Richard's eyes lit up with genuine interest, and it was at that moment that Tesla realized something disturbing. Richard was not a monster. He was a scientist, and Eleanor was his experiment. During dinner, Tesla observed every interaction. Richard dominated the room with natural charm, telling jokes about the hospital, making the guests laugh. But whenever Eleanor tried to contribute to the conversation, he would subtly interrupt her. Not obviously, just enough that she missed the moment. Other times, she delicately contradicted her stories, making it seem like she was confusing details. "Honey, it wasn't last summer. It was 2 summers ago. You always get those dates mixed up." And the cruelest thing, the guests agreed with Richard, smiling at Eleanor with that condescending pity reserved for those who are a little confused. Tesla felt nauseous, not for the food, but for the ingenuity of cruelty. Richard was publicly destroying Eleanor, using his own witnesses as unwitting accomplices. After dinner, while the men smoked cigars in the library, Tesla teased, "Dr. Hastings, your wife seems frail lately." Richard sighed, assuming the mask of a worried husband. "Eleanor has always been sensitive. Lately she's been having episodes of confusion, forgetting conversations, imagining things. I'm considering more intensive treatment." Tesla knew this code. Intensive meant mental hospital. Richard was laying the groundwork to have her committed, and everyone there would serve as witnesses to her mental deterioration. "Fascinating," Tesla said calmly. "And when did these episodes start?" Richard reached into his vest pocket. There it was. "About 3 months ago. Coincidentally," Tesla continued, lighting a cigar just to have something in his hands, 3 months is exactly how long it takes to condition a mind to doubt itself. There are studies on this. Repetitive suggestion techniques, gradual alteration of perceived reality. Some call it brainwashing. The silence in the library was absolute. Richard stared at Tesla with a new, dangerous intensity. "Strange comment, Mr. Tesla. Just a scientific observation." Tesla held the gaze, and at that moment, they both knew. War had been declared, but Tesla had an advantage that Richard was unaware of. He didn't need weeks to plant doubts. He just needed one night to reveal the truth, and I already knew exactly how to do that. That morning, as I returned to the laboratory, Tesla carried with him something precious. Not physical evidence, but patterns. Richard's every unconscious gesture, every micro-expression, every poisoned pause, everything was mapped, catalogued, understood. Now came the most dangerous part, turning the invisible into the undeniable. Tesla opened his notebook and began to write, his hands moving with the speed of someone who had finally found the right formula. I was no longer designing electrical machines. I was designing a trap made of consciousness. And Richard Hastings was about to fall for it in front of everyone he had manipulated, because Tesla had learned something that Edison would never understand. Power is not in deceiving. It's making it impossible to continue the deception. The storm was brewing, and unlike the ones Tesla created in the laboratory, this one would not be contained. Tesla called a meeting, not in his laboratory, but in the social hall of St. Vincent's Hospital. Neutral territory, respectable witnesses. He sent personal invitations to the doctors present at the dinner, to Eleanor, and especially to Richard. The pretext was a lecture on electrical frequencies in medical diagnosis. Richard couldn't refuse without arousing suspicion. The room was packed when Tesla arrived, carrying a leather briefcase and something no one expected, a modified phonograph. Eleanor sat in the back, pale, hands clasped in her lap. Richard occupied the front row, a confident smile on his face. "Gentlemen," Tesla began, his voice echoing around the room, "I have come to speak about something that medicine does not yet fully understand, the frequencies of truth and lies." Some doctors looked at each other, confused. Richard maintained his posture, but Tesla noticed. His right hand instinctively moved towards his vest pocket. Nervousness. "You see," Tesla continued, walking between the rows like a conductor before an orchestra. The human body cannot lie. The mind can fabricate elaborate stories, but the body always betrays. The pulse quickens, the breathing changes rhythm. Microscopic muscles contract. These are invisible signatures, but not for anyone who knows where to look. He opened the briefcase and pulled out a series of photographs, blurry images, motion captures that looked like abstract art. In recent weeks, I have studied a fascinating case, a man who systematically altered another person's perception of reality, not with physical violence, but with something much more sophisticated, cognitive frequency manipulation. Richard laughed, but the sound was too forced. This sounds like fiction, Mr. Tesla. Seems like it, Tesla agreed, turning directly to him. Until you see the patterns. He turned on the modified phonograph. It wasn't music that came from there, but voices, conversations secretly recorded during dinner at the Hastings home. Tesla had hidden a primitive recording device among the library books. Richard's voice filled the room. Eleanor has always been sensitive. Lately, she's been having episodes of confusion. Pause. About 3 months ago, Tesla froze playback. Notice the pause. Exactly 1.8 seconds before mentioning the period. Enough time to fabricate a false chronology. He advanced the recording. And now listen to something recorded 2 days earlier in a conversation with Dr. Morrison. Another voice, the same as Richard. My wife is perfectly fine. Never better, in fact. The silence in the room was grave. Richard stood up, his face red. This is an absurd invasion of privacy. Sit down, Dr. Hastings, Tesla ordered, with an authority that brooked no contest. I'm not finished yet. He walked to a blackboard and started drawing. Waves, frequencies, graphs that looked like secret code. Every lie has a bodily signature, and Dr. Hastings has a particularly revealing one. Tesla pointed to Richard. Whenever he fabricates an untruth, he puts his hand in his vest pocket. He doesn't realize he's doing it. It's an unconscious reflex, a physical anchor to support the mental construction of the lie. All eyes turned to Richard. His hand was, at that exact moment, in his vest pocket. He quickly removed it, but the damage was done. Watch, Tesla continued, relentlessly, showing a series of photographs he had captured at dinner. Here, when he says that Eleanor confuses dates, hand in pocket. Here, when he mentions episodes, hand in pocket. Here, when suggesting intensive treatment, hand in pocket. Eleanor covered her mouth, tears flowing silently, not out of sadness, but out of relief. Someone finally saw. Someone finally proved she wasn't crazy. Richard tried one last trick. That's ridiculous. A gesture doesn't mean... It's not just the gesture, Tesla interrupted him, and now his voice carried something dangerous. Absolute certainty. It's the objects. He opened another briefcase and dumped it on the table. A silver brooch, a pair of gloves, a letter. These objects were removed from the Hastings house within the last 3 days. Always after you, Dr. Hastings, insisted that Eleanor had lost them or imagined possessing them. Tesla held up the letter. This one in particular is interesting. A correspondence from your mother to Eleanor dated 2 weeks ago. You told her you never arrived, but I found her hiding in her private office behind medical books. Richard turned pale. The entire room seemed to have forgotten to breathe. Why? Tesla asked, and for the first time his voice broke slightly, not with anger, but with genuine incomprehension. Why would a doctor, a man dedicated to healing, devote so much effort to destroying his own wife's mind? Richard slumped in his chair. For a moment it seemed like it would collapse completely, but then something changed on his face. The mask fell, and what was left was something frightening, cold indifference. Because I could, he said simply, because it's fascinating to discover how easy it is to make someone doubt their own brain. It starts with small things. A key moved, a conversation denied, and then he smiled, a hollow smile. Then you realize you can rewrite a person's entire reality. It's powerful. Eleanor sobbed loudly. Several doctors stood up, indignant, but Tesla raised his hand, asking for silence. Power, Tesla repeated slowly. You confuse power with cruelty, Dr. Hastings. True power isn't in breaking minds, it's in enlightening them. He walked up to Eleanor and, in front of everyone, extended his hand to her. She held it like someone holding a life preserver in a rough sea. You are not mad, Mrs. Hastings. Never was. And now everyone here knows it. Richard was taken out of the room by 2 hospital security guards. There would be investigations, hearings, consequences, but that no longer mattered to Eleanor. She was standing, breathing as if air had finally reached her lungs, looking at the people around her and seeing, for the first time in months, belief instead of pity. Tesla quietly stored his equipment. Someone touched his shoulder, one of the older doctors. How did you know where to look? He asked, reverence in his voice. Tesla closed his briefcase and replied without looking back. Because I learned that what people hide is never in words. It's in the spaces between them. Urgent update. 6 months later, Tesla received a letter. The envelope was simple, with no return address, but he recognized the delicate handwriting before he even opened it. Eleanor. Inside, just a few lines. Mr. Tesla, I rebuilt my life, not just my mind, my entire reality. Thank you for teaching me that trusting myself wasn't crazy. It was survival. With eternal gratitude, Eleanor. Tesla kept the letter in a special drawer, the same one where he kept his most important projects. Because that wasn't just a solved case, it had been a revelation. He spent the next few months refining what he now called the hidden consciousness map, a complete system for identifying not just lies, but hidden intentions, camouflaged fears, silenced truths. It wasn't magic. It was physics, applied to human behavior. But Tesla soon realized something that deeply troubled him. This knowledge was a weapon. One gray autumn afternoon, while walking through Central Park, he found a man sitting on a bench, quietly crying. Tesla would normally look away. Other people's emotions always made him uncomfortable, but this time it stopped. Observed the hunched posture, the hands hiding the face, the irregular breathing, but there was something more, something that didn't fit. The man's shoulders weren't shaking like they should have been. The tears were not accompanied by the breathing rhythm of genuine sadness. It was an act. Tesla calmly walked over and sat down next to him. The man didn't even notice initially, absorbed in his performance. "May I ask," Tesla said softly, "how much did you expect to gain from this?" The man froze. He wiped his face and turned around, surprised. "Pardon?" People pass by, see a man crying, and some would certainly offer money, wouldn't they? Tesla had no judgment in his voice, just curiosity. "It's smart, I admit. Appealing to compassion is effective." The man hesitated, then laughed bitterly. "How did you know? Your eyes, they were too dry. You were trying to force tears, but your body wouldn't cooperate. And his hands, they were shaking, yes, but not with sadness. From fear? No, despair. Real despair." The man lowered his head, the entire charade falling apart. "I lost my job 3 weeks ago. My daughter is sick. I need to pay the doctor, but no one will hire a 50-year-old man without references. I didn't know what else to do." Tesla was silent for a long moment. Then he took some bills out of his pocket and handed them to the man. "Not out of pity," Tesla said before he could thank him. "But why do you—" He had the courage to try, even though he knew he was lying. And because deep down, his lie hid a much greater truth. The man held the money with shaking hands, real tears now flowing. "Why are you doing this?" Tesla stood up, adjusting his coat. "Because I learned that understanding what someone is hiding doesn't mean judging them for it. Sometimes what we hide is simply too much humanity for the world to bear." As he walked back to the lab, Tesla reflected on everything he had discovered since that night with Marcus. The lies, the disguised truths, the masks we all wear, and he understood something fundamental. People don't lie just to deceive. They lie to survive, to protect, to hide not others from themselves, but themselves from others. Richard Hastings lied out of cruelty. Marcus lied out of fear. That man in the park lied out of desperation. And Eleanor never lied, but she had almost been destroyed by believing someone else's lies. Tesla arrived at the laboratory and turned on all the lights, as he always did, but this time not to push away the shadows, to accept them, because he had learned that not all darkness needs to be eliminated. Sometimes it just needs to be understood. He sat down at his desk and wrote in a new notebook with a black leather cover. What someone hides is always visible, not in words but in silences, not in gestures but in hesitations. The truth is never in what they say, but in the rhythm with which they breathe before speaking. And the biggest secret of all is this: we all hide something. The point is not to judge what they hide, but to understand why they need to hide it. Tesla closed the notebook and looked out the window. Outside, New York glowed with electric lights, each of them the fruit of his mind. But this discovery, this intimate understanding of the human soul, was something no machine could ever replicate. Edison would continue trying to dominate him through betrayal and espionage, but now Tesla saw every move before it even happened, not because he was smarter, but because he had learned to read the invisible. And this ability didn't make him more powerful. It made him more human. Years later, when asked what his greatest invention was, Tesla did not mention alternating current, nor the coil, nor wireless energy systems. He simply said, "I learned to see what people hide, and most importantly, I learned to respect the why." Because in the end, we all carry secrets. We all have poisoned pauses, revealing gestures, distorted frequencies. We are not perfect machines. We are imperfect humans trying to survive in a world that demands perfection. And perhaps the greatest act of intelligence is not to expose these secrets, but to recognize that each of them tells a story of pain, fear, hope, or simply life happening. Tesla smiled alone in the empty laboratory, and in that silence, he finally found peace, not in the electric current that lit up the world, but in the chain of understanding that connected all souls, visible or invisible, true or masked. And this current, unlike any other he had invented, would never go out. If this journey resonated with you, if you recognized something of yourself in these hidden frequencies, subscribe to the channel. Because just as Tesla learned to see the invisible, perhaps you too are ready to see beyond the masks, starting with your own.